Nazis out, they chant in Vienna. This man says he fears Austrian democracy is being lost because the Freedom Party's Herbert Kickl could become the country's next chancellor. He calls himself the People's Chancellor, a term once used by Adolf Hitler. Kickl also says he opposes the Nazi SS being held collectively guilty for war crimes, despite the SS's documented involvement in the Holocaust. And he's promised to remigrate migrants to achieve a more homogenous nation. His party won a plurality, nearly 30% of the vote. Similar parties also saw electoral success. Germany's Supreme Court ruled the Alternative for Deutschland, which won a state vote last year, pursues goals against democracy. The National Front in France, in opposition, founded by a man who was repeatedly convicted for downplaying the Holocaust. And Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, whose party was founded by a staffer of Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building.
And 4 years after he refused to accept the outcome of the election, and after his supporters tried to stop it from being certified, for which many have been convicted,
make America great again.
Donald Trump returns to the White House. Some worry those voted into power could undermine democracy.
I think he represents a threat, and a very real threat, because I don't think he understands democracy.
University of Oxford professor Margaret Macmillan studies international history.
Democracies are resilient, but they can also be quite fragile. And once you start breaking some of the rules in democracies, then putting the pieces back together again is difficult and can take time.
Research shows worrying trends. A poll, as reported by the UK's Guardian newspaper, found 1 in 5 Millennial and Generation Z Britons prefer strong leaders without elections to democracy. And 47% say no current political parties represent my views and values closely.
More democracy enables more freedom.
The nonprofit group Freedom House tracks freedom around the world. Its most recent report shows political rights and civil liberties declined in 52 countries in 2023 and improved in only 21, marking the 18th year in a row freedom has declined. Most of that retreat, researcher Yana Gorokhovskaya says, happened in countries like Russia and Iran, where there is no democracy and conditions worsened. But not always.
The United States continues to have an incredibly robust and strong democratic system with lots of different actors. But certainly, where we've seen democratic decline, it's been elected leaders that have driven it. And so that's something that we have to be conscious of.
That leader, also often populist, she adds. Like Hungary's prime minister for the past 15 years.
Under Viktor Orban, what we've seen is that Hungary's political rights and civil liberties for people in the country have steadily declined.
Orban connected a deadly attack in Germany to immigration, despite the fact the suspect lived in Germany for decades, and police say his media posts show support for the AfD. Orban's comments follow a pattern.
A slower process of democratic decline has happened under leaders who undermine institutions. They usually go after, I would say, the media first, then the judiciary. The other big one is attacks on minority groups and restrictions on minority groups.
Gorokhovskaya says it's the same in Italy.
They also passed an extremely punitive and restrictive law on surrogacy that basically makes it impossible for gay men to have children in the country. So those are all really terrible things.
Democracy is not just voting, leaving a mark beside a candidate's name in a school gym. And the right to do so, the belief that voting is inviolable, sacred, like other rights, to be free from persecution or to speak out, doesn't reside in the paper of the ballot.
Democracy wouldn't work if we do not have trust with each other.
Take it from someone whose democracy is gone. Though it did not go quietly. Hong Kongers flooded the streets in 2019 to protest Chinese laws limiting the region's autonomy, like the National Security Law, which effectively ended the region's free democracy in 2020.
We were quite scared, but at the same time we were raged because people around us just being arrested for the reason that we want Hong Kong to be democratic and free.
Carmen Lau was in those protests and then elected, age 24, to become a district councillor. She later refused to swear an oath of allegiance to China's Communist Party, so was forced to resign, then to flee.
There were personal safety issue on me. I was surveilled and shadowed by some suspicious people.
And many who didn't leave are now in jail. In December, the new Hong Kong authorities issued an arrest warrant for Lau.
Not only people are silent, but also it discouraged them to even go out to the streets. Trust between Hong Kongers, I don't think it exists anymore.
Experts say the decline is different in the West.
Well, there's a disillusionment with democracy. I think there's a feeling that politicians are in it for themselves. There's a sense that if you're very rich, you can buy a position. You buy a position in an election, you funnel money into particular causes, and you manage to promote them.
The lure of strongmen, experts tell Global News, also lies in the belief they can fix things.
They linked the orientation for Austria to the migration crisis.
University of Vienna professor Heinz Gardner.
It's mainly the migration issue, and these right-wing parties made the migration to an issue. It is not so much an issue as the right-wing parties are pretending.
Another reason, in a warning from our president's last speech.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies, told for power and for profit.
Despite sanctions, authoritarian countries like China and Russia, with the criminal groups they sponsor, continue to pump out mis- and disinformation. Microsoft's president testifying to Congress what the company detected.
We saw a Russian group put online an AI-enhanced video putting into Vice President Harris's words at a rally words she never spoke.
And a Microsoft threat report stated China, too, will create and amplify AI-generated content that benefits their positions in other states' elections.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms.
Joe Biden also cautioning against tech leaders. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, spent millions to help Donald Trump get reelected in 2024 and voice support online for far-right European political parties. DisinfoWatch, a disinformation monitor, says Musk's posts legitimize conspiracy theories.
They grow within these communities, and it becomes a threat to, vulnerable communities, our society, and our democracy.
All echoing another time when some Americans lost trust in democracy.
What's happening in the United States reminds me of the Gilded Age before the First World War, when you did have these enormously rich oligarchs who had very little control, they paid very little tax, they amassed enormous fortunes.
The U.S. is the world's oldest modern democracy, and its economic and military might means its democratic norms reverberate around the globe, experts say.
Trump wants to get rid of that. He wants to staff the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA, the Defense Department, the ones that he sees as really important, Homeland Security, with his own people, not just at the top, but going down into it. And he wants to use them. And this is not democratic. This is terrifying.
Macmillan says how much one person can affect their country and the world is happenstance of history. The conditions need to fall into place, and it's never as simple as going in one direction.
You can see democracies in the past that have gone through very bad patches. Think of Germany, think of Japan, both of which had democratic institutions before they were taken over by dictators in the 1930s. We don't have too many choices ahead of us. And I think if you give way to despair, it's a luxury. You know, I think we can be aware of all the problems and issues we have today, but I think we have to keep hoping things will get better.
Democracies have guardrails and so can adapt, Macmillan says.
We should be aware that sort of right-wing populist leaders are coming to power, but we shouldn't necessarily assume the worst every time.
Gorokhovskaya points to Italy. Some of Meloni's coalition partners do not support Ukraine. but she has, becoming more moderate after entering office.
Many of the former Nazi members went to the Freedom Party.
Gartner points out Austria's Freedom Party has been in ruling coalitions before, though has never held the chancellorship.
All these right-wing parties will not be able to change the democratic systems in these Western countries. So these constitutions are strong enough. Trump or Kickl, there will be no new Mussolinis.
And he tells Global News most of the votes for populists are protest votes, though he still admits fear Kickl could change the character of the country, making it more hostile to non-Austrians. And while political rights have receded in Orban's Hungary, Poland is recovering, electing a new government that's repealing the limitations on the media and judiciary the old leaders put in place.
In Poland, there was the highest turnout since 1989 in 2023's election, and obviously that ousted the government that was in power for almost a decade.
Pushing back, Gorochovskaya explains, means investing in institutions and fact-checking.
That means supporting a free and independent media. That means respecting independent courts. We need to make it evident that democracies deliver. They deliver for people's rights, but also they deliver economically.
And the great thing about a democratic regime is you can, as long as it survives, you can criticize it, you can hope that the next election will bring change. Authoritarian regimes are brittle. They don't change. They just usually get more and more repressive.
Macmillan also suggests limiting how much parties and politicians can raise.
I think almost everyone in the Senate is a multimillionaire or a billionaire, and that says something about the role of money, which I think is bad, because it is not representative of the general public.
But in parts of Europe, things remain uncertain. The AfD and National Rally could still come to power in upcoming elections, and could withdraw desperately needed support for Ukraine, another democracy fighting for its existence.
People are so afraid of speaking up, not even in political issues, but also local or domestic issues.
A final warning from someone whose democracy was smothered. It is not perfect, she says, but preserving it means practicing it.
It is very heartbreaking to see the place that I was born and raised has become like this. If you just step up and vote only when things happen, it will be too late by then.
Nathaniel Dove, Global News.